Well, ladies and gentlemen, in this video, I'm going to be going through the United States intelligence on September 11th. Everyone wanting to know, what did the U.S. know? And there's some real interesting stuff, even just surface level stuff. Now, I do probably want to make a series of videos where I really dig into it, but it is remarkable just, again, looking at the surface level mainstream articles. Bin Laden determined to strike. That was a presidential daily briefing on August 6th of 2001. So you're talking about 35, 36 days before September 11th, little over a month. There's no September 31st, so I do think it's, what would that be, 34, 35 days. Remarkable. Bin Laden determined to strike. The president told us that the August 6th report was historical in nature. President Bush said the article told him that Al-Qaeda was dangerous, which he said he had known since he had become president. The president said bin Laden had long been talking about his desire to attack America. He did not recall discussing the August 6th report with the Attorney General or whether Condoleezza Rice had done so. He said that if his advisors had told him there was a cell in the United States, they would have moved to take care of it, and that never happened. Now, there was a previous plot before 9/11 in the mid-1990s called the Bajanka plot that was thwarted. But obviously September 11th, the terrorists entering the U.S., Atta entering twice via visa, and I guess nobody was able to figure it out. When you look at the U.S. intelligence, you would think, at least the terrorists in the United States, they would be found out through likely foreign intelligence, because these guys mainly met in Germany, the Hamburg cell. The foreign intelligence would relay that there are potentially terrorists in the U.S. domestically. Obviously, they were not stupid. When they entered the United States, they staggered the times. They made it to where they all didn't enter at the same time. It's not like a gang or anything. And they tried staggering it to where they lived in different places. But it is crazy to get a memo and get a daily briefing on August 6th of 2001. And the Condoleezza Rice stuff is just crazy when you look at when she got questioned in 2002 by the 9/11 Commission about September 11th and the things that predated the horrible acts. Now, she was the National Security Advisor from 2001 to 2005. It was official late in 2000. George W. Bush named her that. And these were some of her claims while she was being, I guess you could say, interviewed or interrogated on the things that happened that led up to September 11th, because I think that is the real conspiracy in all of this. People can say things about the towers and things about the planes and how could they all hijack 4 planes. It doesn't make any sense. But the real conspiracy is what was happening, because honestly, a lot of that can be disproven. Even Building 7, it really doesn't make much sense. I can get into that in another video. But the weird thing is, to have a briefing and say, yes, bin Laden's probably going to strike America, and then to straight up lie, as you'll see here, is very strange. So the claim, this is Condoleezza Rice, I do not remember any reports to us a kind of strategical warning that planes might be used as weapons. That was the claim. The fact, Condoleezza Rice was a top national security official with President Bush in July of 2001 at the G8 summit. Their U.S. officials were warned that Islamic terrorists might attempt to crash an airliner into the summit that they were attending, prompting the officials to close the airspace where they were staying. So it's just so crazy when you think about it. They closed the airspace because they were worried about an Islamic terrorist crashing a plane into the summit where George W. Bush and a lot of the top leaders were meeting in July of 2001, and then they rammed planes into the Twin Towers a few months later. And Condoleezza Rice says, I mean, you could say maybe she interpreted the question differently when it comes to like an actual warning. Nonetheless, it is very strange. Another claim, there was nothing about the threat of attack in the U.S. in the presidential daily briefing the president received on August 6th. So that's the reference to the August 6, 2001 briefing. The fact, Rice herself confirmed that the title was Bin Laden determined to attack inside the United States. And see, this is why it makes no sense. You would think if the United States knew this information, there would be some type of significant investigation, not only in the United States, but overseas, that would, you would hope, link all of the terrorists that at the time were living in the United States. I think they were living in Florida in August of 2001, and then they came up to Boston. But you would think there would be something if we knew that this was potentially going to be happening. Our intelligence, especially overseas, could link the fact that the Hamburg cell was talking to Bin Laden. And you know, once you realize it and once you get a handle on who some of these terrorists were and identify them, it becomes a lot easier. The dominoes start to fall. You say, why is he in the United States on a visa? Why is that one in the United States? And there's like 10 or 11 different terrorists infesting the United States on visas that had previously met with Bin Laden, that had ties to it. That's how this whole thing would be blown up. So the United States knew about this, and it still ends up happening. And you've got Condoleezza Rice denying it, even though she wrote, I would assume, wrote the title, Bin Laden determined to attack inside the United States. You've got the G8 summit happening in July, where they had to close the airspace because they were worried about a terrorist flying a plane into the summit. It's the exact same theory, using airplanes as weapons. This is something that they knew about, and it happens anyways a few months later. Another one of the claims was that almost all of the reports were focused on Al-Qaeda activities outside of the U.S., especially in the Middle East and in North Africa. We did not have threat information that was in any way specific enough to suggest something was coming to the U.S. And then it says, fact on page 204 of the Joint Congressional Inquiry into 9/11 noted that, quote, in May of 2001, the intelligence community obtained a report that Bin Laden supporters were planning to infiltrate the U.S. That was in May of 2001. It's like it's all leading up to September. You get all of these reports in May. You get the threat in July. You get the briefing in August. I mean, it's like there's something every month in 2001, and this is just mainstream stuff that you can see. We don't even know about the stuff that's yet to be declassified, things like that. The report was included in an intelligence report for senior government officials in August of 2001. In the same month, the Pentagon acquired and shared with other elements of the intelligence community information suggesting that 7 persons associated with Bin Laden had departed from various locations in Canada, the UK, and the United States. And so, seemingly via that inquiry, what they're insinuating is that in May of 2001, the Pentagon knew that Bin Laden people could be inside of the United States. All of this is crazy. They knew all this information. September 11th still happens. You've also got the Bush administration has been committed to the transformation of the FBI into an agency dedicated to fighting terror. That's what Condoleezza Rice said in 2002. The fact says before 9/11, the Attorney General de-emphasized counterterrorism at the FBI in favor of more traditional law enforcement. And according to the Washington Post, in the early days after 9/11, the Bush White House cut nearly 2/3 an emergency request for counterterrorism funds by the FBI, an internal administration budget document shows. And so Bush cuts these funds even after September 11th happens. And it is crazy. If you guys don't know, George W. Bush had the highest approval rating ever since we began tracking approval ratings after September 11th. Now, obviously, everybody goes back to that time, and the first thing they mention post 9/11, you talk about the airport security, things like that, but they say there was such a patriotism to America. Everyone came together, they rallied, and George W. Bush's approval rating was, I think it was like 86, 87%. I know for a fact it was the highest we've ever recorded. Now, sure, we don't have approval ratings of Abraham Lincoln, things like that, but just in general, since we started tracking it and getting legitimate data, maybe in the 60s, 70s, Reagan was never close to that, even with his blowout victory. It's just crazy. Either way, guys, this information is very key when it comes to discussing September 11th. And this is the kind of stuff that you really need to look into. All this stuff that they knew before, possibly even knowing that there were bin Laden type people in the United States, at least the Pentagon knowing something about it in May of 2001, the briefing in August of 2001, the G8 summit where they had to close down the airspace. They warned of potential terrorists using aircrafts as weapons, and yet it still happens. And this is the type of stuff that needs to be looked at. I know people want to say, well, what about Building 7? What about the towers, the explosives? Listen, I'm not going to get into this again, but it is very hard to prove that, especially when you look at the South Tower. Guys, look at the side of the South Tower as it falls. I mean, you can see the South Tower falling for 5 seconds in slow motion before it actually collapses. You can tell it's going to collapse because the side of it is falling inward. And it's like this slow-moving car crash, and it's all upscaled in HD. And it'd be very surprising if there was some type of explosion that caused it. It looked like the structure lost total integrity, and it collapsed, and that's why it collapsed on its side. But either way, guys, this is interesting stuff. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.